Welcome to Cyber Safe with AJ. We're here to talk about real human side of cybersecurity. Today's episode is a powerful one. Instead of talking about technology, we're talking about people because cyber crimes just don't target systems, it targets the human psychology. Joining me today is a cybercrime survivor who bravely agreed to share her story. Like many people, she was busy juggling life and responsibilities, and in the moment, designed to create urgency and stress where criminals exploited that moment. Her story reminds us of something important. Cybercrime is not about intelligence or technical knowledge, it's about manipulation. Criminals are experts at creating pressure, urgency, and trust in just the right moment. Today, we're going to talk about how the cybercrime happened, what the experience was like, and most importantly, the four key tactics cyber criminals use to manipulate everyday people and businesses. This conversation is about awareness, humility, and understanding that anyone can be a target at any time. And before I introduce my guest, just for the audience who hasn't followed me along from the beginning, I too personally went through a major cybercrime in 2019, and all the tactics we're going to talk about today were deployed on me during a very difficult time in my life. So I want you to welcome Perna. And I want to thank you, Perna, for your story and sharing what happened to you. And listen, I hate to hear stories like yours personally, because I went through one. And I wanted maybe for the audience, just for you to high level introduce yourself, what your life was like at that time, what it looked like before this happened.
Well, first of all, thank you, AJ, for the work that you're doing and the awareness and the education that you're bringing in the cyber security and the cyber crime space because this work is really needed. A little bit about me. I am Prerna Mahajan, and I have lived over 22 years in a technology career. And I am a C suite technology executive. I have been an acting CIO and currently a chief innovation officer for a firm, along with being a holistic success coach and mindfulness coach. And I've been living a full life. And to answer your question, where I was when these things started happening is it did not happen just at once. What was happening is I was living a full life as a technology executive, as a mother of two kids, as someone who was growing my own business. So I had a very busy life. And I think that's where our weak point is. And these cyber criminals know about it. So for 2 years, literally 2 years, I was getting hit by a scam in different ways or forms. And somehow, when I was very close to being getting scammed, my inner voice or intuition would just warn me, like, this doesn't feel right. And hence, I would not take an action. But this was happening to me for almost 2 years when I started my business. And then last year, November, there was something that happened massively where I lost literally my entire life savings from a financial institution. And that was because, as a busy person in my life, I was not paying attention. And I had this sense of urgency, right? As a tech exec, I am juggling multiple things. I am juggling, multiple emails, multiple projects while I'm juggling all the other things with my personal life. And that's what I think these cyber criminals look into, like how can they create a sense of urgency for us to take action, and then they can get in. And this time I would say they got me because they tried almost in various forms and ways.
2 years you mentioned,
For
right?
2 years,
For
yes.
2 years, they were priming you in indirect ways, maybe through different mediums. And I think about when I reflect back on my time going through my crime, because I had to step back. It took a while because mine's obviously a lot different than yours. But I looked at like three elements. I was overstressed.
Hmm.
I was overwhelmed because I was going through three major life incidents. I was going through a personal adult life transition. I had a daughter who was sick and I was out of work for the first time. So I had like the three perfect elements that made me open for someone to, and I was on a social media platform that was very public. So when I did open to work, they knew everything about me. So when I was primed through the interview process, similar It's like you said, someone probably looked at your profile on whatever sites because you're publicly known, like being in the technology arena. You're probably on social media, connected to your friends, and they knew how to build towards your vulnerabilities, knowing you're busy, knowing you're multitasking, and also just they kept going at different angles and they finally found an in, right?
They
So
finally
that
found.
you trusted. There's always like a small in. And I went through the same exact thing. So as far as what do you feel made it feel legitimate? Like when they found that in, what made when you were to reflect back on that moment of the because that's a long time, 2 to 3 years, try to
Yeah.
get your attention. What was the anchor or the thing that they maybe made it feel real versus fraudulent? Because obviously it turned out to be fraudulent, but what was that little anchor you think that they used to
Yeah.
make it
So
look normal?
yeah, so I I would say these scammers have become very sophisticated. The language that they use in emails and all, it looks really professional, right? And right now we are in the digital world, right? As a tech exec, I use emails, texts, phone for everything.
Yeah, absolutely.
And when an email comes, whether it is from a financial institution or from a scammer, you can barely tell the difference. Gone are those days where you will find spelling mistakes or the logos won't look similar or even the links will have not the secure link or some mistakes. They have become so sophisticated that their communication will look as similar to a real communication from a financial institution. And that's what happened is like they impersonate these communications so well and they're so well drafted that it creates a sense of urgency to people like me who are busy juggling so that they just take the action right there and right then. And that's what was like, that felt legitimate. But then, I did not feel anything unusual because I get a lot of emails from the financial institution, whether it is, hey, this is your account balance or this is your statement. And it looked exactly the same.
It looked exactly the same. And with that too, I was thinking they probably were feeding off of what maybe you shared as well, even a little bit, not a lot. Even if you didn't share a lot, they're feeding into a sense of urgency, not the FOMO, fear of missing out, but like, do this now, like before we have fewer whatever the financial institution, whatever that message was to really action you to participate, right?
Yes. Yes, because it was more like, hey, we encountered a suspicious activity on your account. Take action now and confirm you were not using it and there was a button. So how would you know the difference if it looked so real? And now that I'm juggling, I want to really say, hey, yes, confirm this is not me, right? And despite all this multi-factor authentication, OTPs and voice thing, what I've realized is these scammers, if like you were saying, if they had my data and if they were priming me, somehow they were also monitoring all of these things and probably had all these checks and balances in place when they were ready to hit me hard.
Yeah, because I was thinking about one thing most people misunderstand about cyber crimes is they think it's about hacking your computer. It's really about hacking our personal human behavior, right? Individually in that moment. And I remember reflecting back on my own personal cyber crime. I gave them all the information they needed. I literally went through, I thought I was going through an interview process because it was an HR scam, right? So I went through an HR questionnaire. I went through could you do these exercises for onboarding? They were taking all the information I fed them and used it, reflected it back on me, and used it against me as the time went on. Now, mine was a very short window of time. It was 30 days, and I lost significant amount of money. But it was when I looked back, they were pressuring me to do tasks and exercises, and then they would revalidate. If I wanted to ask a question, they would respond promptly, right? And they
Mm.
would pull me back in, they would mirror me, and then they would do reverse psychology, or at least that was my this is me reflecting back because mine was so quick. But when I look back, like I gave them the gift of what I did. I had high credit availability. I shipped IT equipment all around the world
Oh.
and wasn't paid. But when I think of for you, when you look back, what pressures were they sharing are putting on you. So because you said they look like a real institution. I
Hmm.
think you even described they showed you a platform that looked legit.
Yes.
It looked legit. They did certain exercises. So when you look back, like what pressure were you getting psychologically, you think, from that group?
It was the sense of urgency, right? Like they knew that as a busy professional and a mom or whatever, right? Like they knew that if I'll see probably that email, there will be a sense of urgency. And what do you do when you have a sense of urgency, but you have no time? Is to react, right? You don't
Yeah.
even have time to think, right?
Yeah.
Oh, there's a potential like someone is trying to get into your account and we found a suspicious activity with a very sophisticated message. Click here if you were not the one, and you just click because that's the reaction. You don't have time to look like, is this message looking great? Is the logo fine? Is the link not
Is it
right?
coming from the same person?
Yes.
Yeah.
And when you click on it, the platform also looks the same as a financial institution. You can tell the difference, but it's the sense of urgency that they create for us to take an action so that they get our information, like you shared, right? Got all of your information and used it against you. That's their whole point, is to get your information so that they can use it to scam you or get the money withdrawn. And like I said, despite the multi-factor authentication and all,
Yeah.
somehow they knew how to get in to those also to
Yeah.
the
And I think when you shared your story with me originally, urgency was big, right? They
yes,
kept putting a rush on you making a decision. And I think you shared you made a decision, but at one point questioned it. But they sound like they came from authority, so they credit. I think you shared even proved by crediting back your account a
yes.
portion. So share that a little bit because I think that was part of the obviously manipulation, but they sounded like authority. "Hey, oh, if you're nervous, we'll give you your money. We'll put it back into your account." So, would you mind sharing for the audience, like, what that felt like? Because I believe you felt like you were working with an authority figure, right? A valid institution, and you started voicing some of the flags you were feeling probably in your gut.
Yes.
And share with the audience what that felt like and, like, what happened as you started questioning their institution at some level.
Yeah, so you're right. Like they use your psychology, right? They meet you where you are. So I had this suspicion or small moment of hesitation again, that internal voice saying something doesn't feel right. So, of course, everything these days, the communication is through emails or text. Busy professionals and people, we don't have time to call and all of that. And that is the biggest mistake, right? Sometimes we do.
Uh-huh.
So when I had that suspicion, they even, you're right, they, again, you know how they have this, hey, we can credit this back to make sure you are the right person and all of that. They did that, the money crediting back to my account and all of that, make sure that it is really that financial institution.
Yep.
But that was not real. It was even fake money. I can't believe the platforms are so sophisticated that a person like me, like that was my biggest aha moment, that I thought I'm technology savvy. I've lived 22 years in technology. I am an exec. I oversee cybersecurity policies and all of that. But even if I can fall prey for their perfectionism, anyone.
Anybody, absolutely. I was in the same boat being in the high tech industry since 1996. I'm dating myself. But I had the firewall, I had the credit lock, I had everything you could think of that were IT type like tools to protect myself. What the crime was on my psychology because I just had so much going on. Like you said, you're multitasking, you run multiple businesses or join a lot of professional organizations, you have your family, and I was caught in a very similar situation. I was full fire hose all the time. And I believe I shared this with you. For me, being the first time out of work for my entire career, I had a sense of urgency. I've never not worked. I've worked since I was 11, so I have to work. So when the opportunity came across, it looked legit, what I call enough. I'm like, okay, I'll deal with because I've dealt with many shenanigans throughout my career. So I'm like, okay, I can deal with this. And then when all the flags were going off in my body, and I even had family members. I mean,
Uh,
this is how stubborn I was at the time because I was going through all these life changes. I have a twin sister, and she's like, "Is this real?" And I'm like, Of course it is. I did my vetting, and but I didn't share with her all the flags that were going off on what I was witnessing. The big thing for me was I never saw them visually.
Okay.
When I spoke to them, it was quick on the phone, or it was, like you said, email communication only, texting. So that's a big thing with fraudulent behaviors, that a lot of times the voice is not there or the visual.
Yes.
And when I would do follow-ups, it would then be transferred to somebody else, so they put me on to somebody else. So I had the flags, but I just didn't wanna believe it was real at the time. When I was thinking back on your story, it's our timing, we're busy, we're
Mm-hmm.
distracted, and they leverage the fact that we're distracted at all times. So for me, the biggest thing I learned out of this was the pause, right? I knew all as you did, like, coming from the high-tech world, I knew I was supposed to check the original organization. I knew I was supposed to use a different source. But when they get you in that moment, and we're just human, having a human experience, it's very easy to allow someone, like, in our lives that way. Oh, okay, so let's go to recovery and lessons. What was it like for you after the incident, from a recovery perspective? And recovery can mean many things to many people. For me, I first went through a emotional recovery, and in parallel, I would say at the same time, I also had to lock down and constantly look at it was anything else breached. So I went through a very detailed phase of looking at everything and double checking everything, and also not trusting anything. What did it look like for you when you were starting recovery? What did that look like for you, and what did you learn from it?
Yeah. So, well, first of all, I just want to share like when this happened with me, I went into a shock. I was like, how could this happen to me? To me? I should know better, right? So, and why would this happen to me, right? I am a very heart centered person. So, why would this thing happen to me? Because it's a big amount that I lost. Like when
Yeah,
I
I
say,
know you shared it. I know.
I was like, so that was a big shocker to me. And then what it led to was shame and guilt.
Mhm,
I want to call this out because, especially for women, we are like, and technically anyone, not just women, but when we think we have come in our lives so far ahead, and this thing happened, which we think may not happen to us,
mhm.
but it happens, it just put you in a place of shame and guilt. And I guess that's what scammers want also. So that you are now even more vulnerable to probably get into something else, So that was those were my first reactions to all of this: shock, shame, guilt. Didn't want to talk to anyone about it. And then I was in my shell for 2 weeks. Again, in all transparency. But I'm also a very mindful person. And I teach mindfulness, right? Despite that, what happened, I made a conscious effort to start coming out of it. So, what I preach is what I believe in. And I was like, despite what is happening, there is a reason behind it. And what I forced myself to come out of that shame, shock, guilt, sadness, you name it, feeling miserable, feeling weak emotionally, mentally, physically, and spiritually, what I did was I started listening to guided meditation because I could not meditate in that state of mind. So that is first thing that I started doing is like, hey, I need to hear words of affirmation that this is okay. Like, this is okay. I'll get over it. This is one phase of my life that I need to overcome. Guided meditation. And the second thing I started doing is gratitude. I know this sounds like, hey, what are you talking about? But these are the two anchors I am really saying that got me out of that 2 weeks of victim mentality because that's what these scammers want. If you've lost a lot or even something like when we spend $100 or $200 or lose it on something, we feel so bad. But if, like in your case, AJ, if you've lost tens of thousands of dollars or thousand Ks of dollars, it
Yep.
really puts into a place of like I've lost everything, right? That I've worked for, lived for, and all of that. So that's the victim's mode that they want you to feel so that now you're even more vulnerable. But those were my two anchors: meditation, guided, because I could not meditate and sit with myself. I was so much in shame. And second thing was gratitude. So I wanted to bring that. That took me out of that mindset of like, why did this happen to me? How could this happen to me? And all of that.
I know
And then,
I went through a very similar phase right at the beginning. It was the minute I realized it was a scam, like I fell to my knees on my kitchen floor, cried, and then the first thing I did was call my credit card company to recover, but I couldn't because I authorized it, right? So I went
yes,
from like a brief moment of like this is like humiliating, and I
yes,
was so mad at myself because I felt the warning signs all the way through, and I'm like I have all the safety measures, and I finally similar to you, I had a couple weeks period of, like, the shame and the guilt, and then I this is so bad about me at times, but I almost feel like I have to go through something difficult to bring me back to what's where I need to be, right?
yes,
So for me, I realized my energy was all over the place, going through many life challenges. But at the same time, I'm like, I wasn't grounded. So it was very easy for a scammer. And that and I love the fact you talked about meditation and kind of pulling yourself out of the situation and being giving yourself grace, because we talked about this when we first met. You have to give yourself grace and say, I'm just a human being having a human experience. And this happens to people because the big thing is like when something really bad happens to me, I go, millions of people go through this. So I'm not alone. Like I really do. It's like my mindset since I was a kid. But when it happens, that first few weeks or the beginning is very like, whoa, like, how did this happen? And you feel guilty that you even let someone violate your brain because it was a
yes,
brain violation. It was way worse than losing the money I lost. It was more of the human psychology of it. And that's the reason I do education in this space and help others. And it doesn't matter if you lose $5 or $1 million. We're all humans and we all have things going on. And I realized through this process was I wasn't grounded because I was going through a lot of things.
mhm,
And even though I was grateful for my life, this, like, kinda made me slow down a little bit, right? And say, "Wow, I should have paused way more than I did, revalidated," but all my protective measures weren't in play at that
yeah,
time. But then I was like, "That's okay." And, like, I tell people I laugh, it's not funny, by the way, but I'm like, "I was the perfect person to test this out on." Like,
yeah,
because
yes,
I never would have gone into cybersecurity and education if it wasn't for the crime. And just like you have your business you're building around calming the body, calming the nervous system. I will tell you that plays into protecting people from cyber crimes because
yes,
that my nervous system was shot at that time. I wasn't grounded. I was all over the place. I was rush, 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 survival mode.
yes,
And my adrenaline kicked in, and it was more of like, "I'm gonna conquer and, like, figure this all out," and then all of a sudden, boom, the bomb drops, and then it was almost like it was like a message from whether it's God or the universe or someone to say, slow down and pause, and be okay, it's alright, you're gonna be fine." But it was hard from a recovery side. So, with that, and you learning to slow down and really meditate and give grace back to yourself because I think to me that's the most important. What else would you think for the audience listening now? What do you wish more that people understood about being targeted by these types of criminals? And because I don't think they're just fishing for like just you and I. I think it's when I think of AI machine learning, it's like playing like the slot machines, right? They have technology going out there. They're going to wait and see who responds. So what did you understand from your own experience, what more people should maybe understand from your lens?
So, first of all, I totally agree with you. When if you have something like this, right, which may feel like having a sense of urgency, take a pause. You're right, AJ. They do prey on our busyness in our lifestyle, right? That they're going to react on this thing and that is their bait. So take a pause. And especially if it is from a financial institution, instead of clicking the links right away, which I've learned my lesson, call them back. Call the number that you have at the back of your credit card or debit card. Don't call the number that they have on the email.
Mhm.
Call back to verify this right. And also understand what is in your control, right? Because that's where we lose sight of like, hey, is this in my control? Like when the scam happened, for me, it took me 2 weeks to come out of that victim's mode. And I love that what you have said is like God is telling you, hey, something bigger is coming or something. I call it now breakdown for breakthrough. And I had to like train my mind on that. Like this is something universe is telling me that is breakdown for breakthrough. But before I do that, what is in my control? So the first thing I did was reached out to my financial institution, let them know. I never used LifeLock or experience, and thanks to you, you educated me on that
Yeah.
and reached out and logged my credit. Then I reached out to my local police department to report it out because it was a big amount of money. And then FBI as well. I submitted the report there because
The
these
IC3 report that we talked about.
Yes, yes, that we spoke about because these were the things that were in my control. And then after that, really, I mean, if I think, how do I get all of this back and worry about all of this, all I'm going to do is stress out for something that I cannot control. So I would say, just be mindful of these things. But before reacting, take a pause. If your gut is saying something is fishy, don't react right away. Call the financial institution, validate this, and then take action or respond better to that. And like I said, I think the biggest lesson learned is, what I've learned after all of this is scamming is the third largest economy in this world right now after US and China.
Yeah.
And 3.6 people are scammed every day globally and 41 people every second. Can you believe it? That's a huge number.
I've heard that same statistic recently. And, it's amazing. And what I've learned by just listening to many people's stories, because people have different levels of stories, as you know. As you share your story, you probably hear other stories. And it's really interesting. So, what was tricky a little bit about mine was I was looking for work. So, it wasn't someone random, or at least at the time perceived, no one random reached out to me. So, one of the other things besides pausing is if I'm not looking for it and someone's reaching out, don't respond. It doesn't matter. If you don't need something or you're not looking for something, that was one of the things I've learned. So after my initial cybercrime, I've been peppered, as you know, being on the dark web. I get visits from criminals daily now, right? Whether it's text,
Yes.
email, on LinkedIn or any site, social media, I get peppered and I have to pause and go,
Yeah,
"Was I looking for this? Do I need this part of my life?" And the answer is no, I do no response. I actually don't even respond anymore. And I do think because we all tend to be people pleasers and responsive with responding, and we care about people, we wanna respond, and that's what they want.
that's
So,
what
like,
they
I've had to learn to pause and not respond, and that's really hard for me. I'm, like, such a giver, whether it's at work or at home, and I always talk to people about that because no response is a response, right?
you're right. You're right.
And, when I talk to a lot of engineers, because just like you, I'm still in technology, I'm in the cybersecurity field. One of the things as I talk to engineers is like they always say, report it as junk or spam. No response is even better because then they record when you're responding to block them so they come a different way.
Hmm.
Oh, amazing. I don't know if that's 100% true, but coming from an engineer where I'm not an engineer, I'm like, all right. So I literally just block. I don't like to say report as junk sometimes. And there's so many tools out there, as we talked about, like in our personal conversation when we were talking about doing this. But just going back to human behavior,
Yes.
pausing and going, was I looking for this? Is this needed in my life? And if not, don't worry about it.
Don't
Like, don't
worry.
even respond. Don't delete, permanently delete. Don't click on anything. You don't even have to do the scan through the email to see if the email's right or the verbiage. Because with AI, machine learning, all that stuff, like you said, very sophisticated. You
Very.
felt it was clean. You felt like you were dealing with a reputable organization. You felt like enough was covered in the checks and balances to get you comfortable enough to try out their platform, right? And then they sent you money back and then vice versa. Whatever the steps were, they look real and they're not. Like they're trading money off of money. And there was a recent scam, you probably heard this one as well with Venmo.
Huh.
Where the Venmo scam, I don't know if you've heard this one yet.
Good.
Venmo, which
Yes.
everyone uses personally, they'll
Yes.
send money to you saying, "Oh, I accidentally sent you money," so you send it back. It's
Yes.
actually, borrowed money. So that, like, once you send them money, they take your money and they ghost you. So that's exactly what my HR scam was. It looked real. I did transactions ordering IT equipment, shipped it all over, like I said, who knows what I funded. I hope nothing bad. But literally, they used my credit availability against me because I had good credit availability, and they gave me bank accounts to send it to, which looked legit. So, like, that's what they're doing. They're making it look more human. So, this is back in 2019, so I can only imagine what your experience was about less than a year ago, and the fact
Yeah.
you're brave enough to even talk about it. Thank you so much. What message would you like to share? I know you spoke about empowerment, releasing the shame and guilt. And when I went through, I said, "Oh, this could never happen to me." Like, did you have any moments like that? Because I did. I surely did. Yeah. Like, how did this happen? But like from your lens, what would you like to share about this experience to the audience, and how you can maybe help someone who may have already gone through it or may not like I said, I'm not here to scare everyone who's not had a cybercrime, but there's many people listening who probably have, right? So
Yeah.
what would you like to share with the people out there?
Yes, so you're very right. I think two messages, right? Number one, intelligence has nothing to do with cybercrime. It's all about human psychology, like you said, right? They play on it and they know how humans react to situations. And especially as busy people or vulnerable people, we are even more prone to how we will react to it. We think it's not going to happen to me. Scams happen to careless people, right? Who don't know how to protect themselves. But this was a profound moment for me and an epiphany in my life to know that this can happen to anyone. Whether you are a capable professional, whether you are a leader, whether you are someone who is juggling many responsibilities, this can happen to anyone. So, like you said, we don't want to like scare anyone off, but awareness is the first step toward, and thank you for doing this work to create awareness and education, because that's the first step. And number two is protection, right? Knowing how we can protect ourselves and educating ourselves around protection, because if we won't know, we won't protect ourselves. So, knowing about what are some of the tactical things we can do in our day to day lives to protect ourselves from these
Mhm.
scams is the
Yep.
biggest thing. And the third thing, like I said, right, despite all of that, life happens, challenges come. This is a life lesson too. And if this happens to you, take it as a grief, okay? Because I would hate to say, hey, don't worry about it. I would say, think of it as a loss. It could, I went through the entire grief process. It was like losing someone.
Yeah, you went through like the 5 cycles of grief, right?
Yes.
You went through the anger, you went through the crying.
Yeah, like
Yeah,
resisting it and
it's
all of that.
paralyzing.
But
Yeah.
then take your time, do bring yourself up from that victim's mode, because that's not going to help you. That's going to even make the situation worse. So process it as a grief. Take your time to go over this loss as a grief process, like losing someone, but leverage some mindful tactics. Like I said, I literally forced myself to listen to meditation, guided meditation, affirmations,
Well, you're calming your
everything
body down, right? You're calming your
to
yeah.
ground myself before I could take any action, because I felt so weak inside. Like betrayed is the right word, probably. That how could
Yeah.
this happen? So I needed to empower myself from within. And I was in so much shame and guilt that I could not talk to anyone. I only told it to my husband and did not release it to my friends until probably months later,
Until you
because
felt more comfortable to talk about it.
yes.
Yeah.
And the reason why I do that now is to spread more awareness. And thank you, AJ, for giving me this opportunity to do that as well, because I didn't want to live in that shame or guilt. I wanted more and more people to know that through your platform, through your podcast, that this can happen to anyone. Give yourself the grace, as you told me when this happened. I'm so grateful to have met you at the right time to give me this education of like, hey, this could happen, and give yourself the grace and take things in charge and control. And that's how I reported it to the police, FBI, and all. And they're doing what is in their control, and I'm doing what is in my control. And that is the awareness and education and the protection that we can take care of
Yeah,
it. Yeah.
absolutely. And thank you for taking time when you and I originally spoke about it, because I got you probably a couple weeks after that happened, where you were probably still in the grieving phase. And that's
Yes.
really hard to talk. And I was a complete stranger, right? You didn't know who I was.
Yeah.
And, it's interesting when I reflect back and what I shared with you when we initially spoke, I went through tactical first, lock everything down, figure out if there's any abnormal activity on accounts. I then went to how can I educate myself to avoid this? And what I learned through the course I took in cybersecurity governance, because I was at that time in the medical field, I learned about the psychology component because I had no idea. I always thought it was, to your point, I growing up in high tech, for a very long time, I thought, "Oh, they must be listening in. They must have." No, it was all a brain manipulation.
Yes.
I had all the bells and whistles in play. So it was lock things down, figure out where my risk areas were, and then get educated. And also at the phase you're at is sharing with others. And I promised myself after I came through this, and listen, it took me a long time to talk about it publicly. I did it with my family, my friends, my neighbors, but that happened in 2019. This is the first year, end of 2025 to now, really sharing it publicly on platforms because I was so afraid of it happening again, right?
There you
And then I had an engineer from the course I was in, I called him, I said, "I'm going out with a pen name, with my book, with my podcast." And he goes, "Why?" And I said, "Because I don't wanna be targeted." And he said, "Allison, you're already out there. They already know
Yes,
who
yes.
you are." And that's why AJ came in. AJ was part of my pen name. So I'm like, "Okay, I'm coming out as Allison AJ," and I kept AJ because I already started publicly announcing what I'm doing. But it was really life opening, talking and sharing with others because I wouldn't have opened up probably on a public media platform because I got violated on one, which was a recruitment site. So it took me my journey was even longer than I anticipated, but I realized by myself not sharing my own story, how like, I shared it locally with my community, with business people, but why social media is so important is you can hit the masses and let people to know they're not alone, and there's things like you shared today that grounded you to help you grieve the loss in the psych and it's a loss of psychology a little bit, right? More than even a physical death. Like, I know you lost money, which is physical, but like we talked about this, your spiritual essence, they took a little piece away, a part of your soul a little
Yes.
bit. And you're like, "How do
Yes.
I get my soul back?
It
How do I
hits
get"
your soul. It does
right?
hit your soul.
Yeah, it
Pretty
hits the soul in a curveball.
Yes. And you're so right. I think by sharing this awareness and education, we also realize that this is not the story that only you and I have. Like I gave you the number. That I did not know this until I was scammed. And then I looked it up and I was like, third largest economy after US and China. Can you believe it? How big this could be, this whole scamming thing. And there are scammers in every nook and corner now, I guess. And you are right, our data is out there because we all have this beautiful thing in our hand, each one of us. So
And even if you took protective measures, it doesn't mean those organizations weren't breached, and that's what I like to share with people. You could do all the protective measures, right? And I was listening to someone recently which was a great idea, which I haven't done personally, but they create different personas for anything that's outside of their world, meaning if it's not banking and medical, they have a persona when they do apps or apply stuff so it never comes directly on them, and, that was brilliant. I'm thinking I would love to have a digital twin of myself with a different name. Now I gotta create a new name. I actually know the name I'm gonna use. Nobody will know. But but it was amazing because I'm learning even from other people and different generations, right? So as you know, I've been around a long time, but everyone's going through it. It doesn't matter when you were born, your kids are going through it, your parents are going through it, your grandparents, if they're using a device, and no one's teaching that situational awareness. And I always share with people I grew up with no technology because the internet started as I was exiting college.
yes,
And you had physical awareness of your surroundings and you knew where the closest telephone booth was. You knew how to get to the police. You knew certain things, tactical awareness that goes away because the digital world has made our frontal cognitive skills softer to trust anything. And I think of just your crime and my crime. It's, the pause, the verifying, slowing down are probably just those simple steps. And there's listen, we could talk about technology you can put in play today that everyone but, like, to me, the pause was probably the most important, the verifying and slowing down, and then the 4th thing is, was I really looking for this? If I don't need it,
Yes.
don't even respond, don't even give it energy, right? I really appreciate you coming on today and sharing your story, you're a brave soul. It's conversations like this, though, are incredibly important to remind us that it's not about technology. It's really about our own human psychology, and everyone's is different. So criminals rely, again, we talked about urgency, authority. They're building off our emotions, and they know they're getting us during a distracted state, which opens up manipulation. And the takeaway is like we talked about: pause, verify, slow down, and honestly, at a fourth, like I just said, is
Yes.
don't respond. No
Don't
response is a response.
I took your word on that. I don't respond to any calls or
No.
any email that I don't ask for.
No,
Now,
there's free ways to forward stuff to your voicemail that never goes because criminals don't leave you messages. Now with the
yeah,
new AI simulation of voice, you never know.
that and also said like one thing I also wanted to say, take off that custom greeting that you had. I learned it like last week because they actually record that and then your voice is cloned for verification purposes.
Yeah, and just like banks, like someone called me for a bank refi, and I'm like, "I wasn't looking for this," and they said, "Can we record you?" I'm like, "No." And I
Yeah,
hung up.
yeah,
But listen, it's only because I keep getting peppered and I get practice. But listen, it comes close quite a bit. Like even with me being aware, it's very easy because I'm always busy and I have to go slow down. Was I looking for this? Do I need to even do anything? And then if I pause and go, I wasn't looking, or if I am looking for this service like you were, then you verify and then you just repeat that cycle in just real simplicity,
yeah,
human behavior. Your story will help everyone. I know so many people have gone through very similar, and
yes,
I appreciate you sharing your story because you're brave. But not a lot of people like to share their stories. I thank everyone for joining in on Cyber Safe with AJ. Stay aware, stay curious, follow the channel, and stay safe. And just remember this: the more you share your stories, it helps all of us, even myself.